I'd now like to introduce you to Microsoft Intune. Now, if you're not familiar with Intune, Intune has been a product that Microsoft came out with a few years ago that they are heavily pushing. In fact, they've really started pushing this hard so that it can be a solution that you can use for managing all your devices, both on-premise as well as off-premise. So devices that travel, devices that are on-premise, even devices that are hosted in the cloud can be managed by Intune. In other words, virtual devices and all of that is all going to be something you can manage through the cloud. Now, first thing to know here is that Intune is Microsoft's MDM, MAM solution. What does that mean? Well, MDM is mobile device management, MAM is mobile application management, and this all came about years ago when the smartphone became popular. So as smartphones became popular, the companies needed a way to manage those devices that are obviously people are carrying around with them. It's kind of a scary thing when you think about the fact that a user could be using their smartphone to browse some of the sketchiest places on the internet, and then 5 seconds later they could be checking their work email and accessing work documents from that same phone. So the industry needed a solution for this. So what ended up happening was an organization called the OMA, the Open Mobile Alliance, which is made up of a bunch of the different cellular companies. They developed a standards, and that standards is called MDM. Microsoft is not the only organization to have an MDM product, but they're the only one we care about in this particular course, right? Since we're here to learn about Microsoft. Microsoft's product, MDM product, is Intune, and it is a cloud-based solution that allows you to enroll devices and manage those devices. Now, of course, Intune did kind of start out focusing just on mobile devices like smartphones, but now all Microsoft software is manageable with the utilization of Intune. So you could be using a desktop workstation. You could be using a Surface tablet. You could be using a smartphone. It could be Apple. It could be Android. They're now starting to support Linux and Mac OS, and all of that can all be managed through Intune. And what's great about it is it doesn't rely on on-premise services. The device could travel anywhere in the world. As long as it's got an internet connection, it can be managed. Now, again, if you just go out to Google or Bing and just search the words, what is Intune, you'll come across this article here, Microsoft Intune. They tell you securely manages identities, apps, and devices. So it's a method for allowing devices to be enrolled. Those devices can be looked at as what apps are on them, inventoried, monitored, and you can then provide remote services against those devices, such as the ability to deploy settings to those devices, deploy apps to those devices, make changes to the apps, make changes to the settings of the device. You can add security down to the device, and it gives you a lot of control. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, that's fine if it's a corporate-owned device, but what if it's a personal-owned device? Well, you are limited on what you can do if it's a personal device. Unless they enroll it, which if it gets enrolled in Intune and it's linked to Intune, at that point you can manage it. But if it's not, you can have application restrictions that are placed on the apps that users install. So for example, if a user downloads Outlook and they start trying to check their work email, as soon as they authenticate using that work email account, then restrictions can be placed on Outlook while they're using it. Same for things like Word and Excel and all of those things. So even if they don't enroll the device, you actually can have a measure of restrictions that are placed on it, okay? So there's lots of capabilities and features that you get with this. You can manage it over the web. They tell you it integrates with other Microsoft services and apps. You get autopilot, which is a big deal. The ability to do zero-touch installation, or zero-touch provisioning remotely, meaning you can buy new computers, plug them in, and autopilot is going to be able to help manage that. I'm not going to get too deep into that in this particular video, but ultimately the amount of things you can do is crazy that they're starting to support, and they're adding new features all the time. In the past, On-premise devices mostly would be managed through GPOs, what are called GPOs, group policy objects. And you can still do that in an on-premise domain, but unfortunately GPOs, if a device leaves the network, those GPOs, those group policy objects, can't really be applied unless there's connectivity. With Intune, you can apply a lot of the same policies that you applied with GPOs on-premise, and it doesn't matter where the device is. The device could be anywhere in the world and still be managed. So let me show you how we can just jump right into Intune. First thing you got to understand is that you could just start right here on portal.microsoft.com and click Show All, and then click right here where it says Endpoint Manager, or you can just go to endpoint.microsoft.com. Either way, you're going to end up in the same place. So here we are in the Microsoft Intune Admin Center. This is sort of the starting point. All right. You can see you start out here on home. You can have a little dashboard to kind of look at all the stuff going on in your environment. You can click on all services and kind of see a list of different services that you've got involved in Intune. You can click devices and you can see all the devices that have been linked to Intune, and currently I have only one device that's linked to Intune. You can see it by platform: Windows, iOS, Mac OS, Android, Chrome OS, Linux. So those are your different platforms. And Microsoft, I do want to warn you, they change this interface almost every week. So don't be surprised if your screen might look a little different than mine. But you have the ability to enroll devices, which I'm not getting too deep into right now, but this is where you would go. And you can see where it mentions autopilot, which is one of the big things that it does. So lots and lots of capabilities here, getting into policies and updates that can be deployed out to your devices. Here's where apps gets managed, so you can deploy applications. You can put restrictions on applications. You have what are called app protection policies. All right, endpoint security, so security capabilities that can be put in place. You have all these reports. You can see what users are given a license. The one thing you'll want to be aware of is when you are working with Intune, a user must have a license to be managed. They're in a user's device that they're going to be linking to Intune. They have to have a license before they can do that. So essentially, like here, if I look at my user JC John Christopher here, John Christopher, if I click on licenses, I can see that I have a license for Intune. How do I know that? Because this right here, Enterprise Mobility Plus Security, gives you a license for Intune. All right, so if you click on that, you'll see we have Intune. All right, not getting into the various plans right now, but there is various plans, and you can have different features that are available to you based on that. All right, but you can actually have an Intune license having this Enterprise Mobility Plus Security subscription. You could actually have an Intune license separately, or if you have one of the Microsoft 365 subscriptions, like the E3 and the E5, you get Intune that way as well. All right, but ultimately, in order for a user's device to be managed by Intune, that'll be done by having a license. By default, Intune will manage up to 5 devices per user, but you can actually stretch that to 15. There is a way to do that, which I'm not getting into right now. All right, so that's where your users are. You can also see your groups that are associated here. Now, this all ties back to Azure AD. So when you click on users and groups, you're really just looking at Azure AD, which is part of what they call Microsoft Intra. Okay. And of course, there's tenant administration here, which ties back to Azure Active Directory. Not going to get into a lot of depth there. And then there's also a troubleshooting and support area. So that just kind of gives you a high-level look and a quick introduction to what Intune is. All right, ultimately, Intune is incredibly powerful, and I'll tell you, this is sort of the future. This is sort of where Microsoft is headed. So if you're wanting to be cutting edge, Intune is definitely something to be looking into. Here's the other good news. Intune is a whole lot less complicated than all the older technologies out there. And it's hard for me to say that. As somebody who has taught group policy objects and all that, I have taught that for 20-something years of my life, since the year 2000. And I was even teaching NT policies back in the 90s. And as somebody who's done consulting work with group policies all these years, I love group policies. But it's dated. Intune, managing devices through Intune, is the way to go. That's the future. That's where Microsoft is wanting you to go, and of course, that's where you kind of want to put your focus in learning this stuff. All right. So hopefully this video has given you a little bit of a basic understanding of the purpose of Intune, and now we're ready to move on.